Well, we're going to finish off our Wonderful Day in the Lord broadcast by looking at Psalm 27, finish off this week, I mean. We looked at Psalm 16 for the first 4 days, and Psalm 27 is a companion psalm in some ways, as you'll see. It also deals with outlook. Psalm 16 dealt with David's focus in different directions, and in this psalm, he's also having an outlook. And we see David is vacillating between faith and fear and confidence and uncertainty. And that's often the way he is, or it's the way he writes, as he very much opens up his heart and his life to you and I to say, look, life is tough sometimes, and sometimes I'm living in faith, and sometimes I'm living in fear, and I'm doing that battle. I'm struggling along at times. And so we see these two things side by side. But what we do know is that our attitude is a result of our outlook. How we think about life, how we look at life, how we emotionally handle life, how we think about life. These are all things that go back to how we look at life. Our outlook will determine in many ways our outcome and certainly our attitude. And that's what we have here. We'll see, for example, in verse 1, as David once again begins with the Lord. He says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Whom shall I dread?" Now, is he going to fear, or is he going and dread, or is he going to have confidence? So notice he says here, "The Lord is my light and my salvation." So he begins with the idea that the Lord is the light. Light, of course, illuminates our way. In the dark, we stumble. We don't know where we're going. We fall over things. In the light, we can see, and we can navigate far easier. And the light of his life, that which enabled him to see and navigate, was the Lord. And he is his salvation. Now, the Lord is our spiritual salvation for certain. We have salvation in him. But he is often, especially in the Old Testament, shown to be the salvation from a particular circumstance of life. The idea of is rescue, or to be delivered. And so very often the Lord himself is the one who delivers these saints, such as David, from the plights that they're dealing with. And so he sees him as his light and his salvation. And so for that reason, why should he be afraid? Whom shall I fear? If you are my light and my rescuer, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. And so as he thinks about who he turns to for a refuge, for strength, for protection, there is no better source than the Lord himself. He sees him as a defense of his life, and therefore whom shall he dread? And so David starts properly, just like he did in Psalm 16. He doesn't start with the problem, he starts with the Lord. And that's going to frame everything else that he will say. We don't have time to look at all this psalm, but I want us to drop down to verse 4 and look at the confidence and the ambition he had in the Lord. "One thing I've asked from the Lord that I will seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in his temple." So stop there for a moment. Here's his ambition. Here's what he seeks. He doesn't seek all the things of life that most people seek. He seeks most of all to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of his life, which means in the Old Testament context, he wants to be in the presence of God. He wants to be where God is. He doesn't want to be out there in the wilderness wandering around. He wants to be where God is, and he wants to behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in his temple. He wants to be able to see up close and personal the beauty and the splendor and the greatness of God. In verse 5, he says, "In the day of trouble, he will conceal me in his tabernacle, and in the secret place of his tent, he will hide me. He will lift me up upon a rock." So in those difficult times of trouble, he's going to conceal, he's going to hide, and he's going to lift him up. These are all things he expects his Lord to do. So his Lord is not only one who is beautiful and marvelous, he's also one who is the rescuer of David's life. And that's who he depends upon. That's who he turns to. We come to the very end of the psalm, because that's where we want to stop here with this psalm. Verses 13 and 14 is these beautiful words, "I would have despaired unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." So in his life, as David goes through these various hard times, he says, I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have gotten through. I wouldn't have made the process if it hadn't been for the very fact that I believed I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I didn't believe the Lord had abandoned us, that he wasn't there for us. I believed he was there, and I didn't know at all points in time exactly what he was up to or how he would rescue us, but I believed that he would. Otherwise, I would have lived in despair because left to myself, I had no hope. In verse 14, he says, wait for the Lord, be strong and let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for the Lord. So maybe at this point in time, David wasn't having all his troubles dealt with as he would hope to have, but he calls on us to wait for the Lord like he does. The Lord's timing is always perfect. It's not always our timing, though. And so it's necessary many times simply to wait for what he wants to do and how he wants to do it and when he wants to do it. And so he didn't despair because he believed that he would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. But right now, he needed to wait and let the Lord be the Lord and do things in his own timing. His job was to trust, to believe, to wait patiently for the Lord. And that is often our job as well. We can't always unravel all the issues and the mysteries of life that hit us, but we can always wait on the Lord because we know that his goodness will come. I hope these Psalms this week have been helpful to you and have given you wonderful days in the Lord.